Good afternoon, everyone. It's Saturday, 1 p.m., February 7, 2026. You're watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois. You're joining me for the 11th Design Diary for New York Noir, the board game I've been working on for 4 years now. Let me say hello officially to everyone in the chat. YouTube says 23 viewers, 2 likes. I'm drinking my Christmas tea. I've got my Papua New Guinea coffee off to the side. Someone asked how long today's session will be. These design diaries tend to go about 90 minutes, I think, and I think this one will be no exception. Let me see if I can bring up the outline. All right, so I don't know how many of you have watched the previous design diaries. I always have a little bit of struggle with these. Part of me is like, I better show off the important parts of it for anyone who's tuning in for the first time, but then I realize, well, what about the people who are serious about this, who are tuning in every week? You don't want to see me do the same thing every time. You probably get bored as it is. But then I was thinking, well, look, if you're watching it live, you're probably willing to, maybe you just want something to fill your time. If you're really here for just the informational content, you're probably better off not watching this live. Then you can just fast forward, put it on 2x speed, and jump around. So I'm not going to overly worry about that. But I do have a structure for these design diaries, and that is I've got an outline. I'm going to walk through it, but you should feel free to ask questions at any time, and I'll periodically check in the chat to see if there are questions and answer them. And then at the end, if there are any questions and people just want to hang out and talk about ideas, I'm happy to do so. So I do have a little outline here of today's session, a little bit of a recap about how we got to this point. Then I'll talk about some updates to the directories, updates to the current cases that are available to play and playtest, talk about some new features of the New York Noir website, and then the bulk of this session will be spent talking about the online map and search tools rewrite and explaining why that happened, why that's what I've been doing for the last 3 weeks, month. And that will segue into a discussion of AI coding. I'd love to get some feedback from those of you who've been doing it. I'm going to talk about my experiences using it heavily over the last month. We'll have a little bit of an updated roadmap for the project. And then I want to focus a little bit more on where I really would love volunteers for this final stretch of the project this year. And this year really is sort of the final stretch of this project. There are a couple areas where, boy, I could use some help getting over the finish line. And then I'll just talk about where to learn more and if there are any other questions. Okay. Quick question up front. I'm trying to figure out if I should print them. Do not print the directories yet. They are not ready to be printing. I'm in the same boat. We've got a whole bunch of cases that I want to play on the channel, and I don't want to start playing them until I've printed out a new set of directories, and the directories still need a tiny bit more work. In fact, here I have the stack of directories from the old version. These are version 4, online is version 5, but there's still one more round of changes. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but don't print out the directories yet. You could print out the cases that you're going to play, and you can write on them and take notes on them, but don't print the directories yet. I think that will be a good thing to touch on when I talk about the online tools. But let's start here by doing a little bit of recap. So the last update was November 8th, and I spent much of that update talking about some substantial changes to the directories. Some big improvements got made, especially to residents. I populated the city with 1,000 or so duplexes, which are buildings with like 2 people living in an upper floor and a lower floor without a doorman. Those are different from apartment buildings. You've heard me talk at length about how New York Noir treats residents slightly differently than Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Many people live in apartments with apartment numbers and neighbors. Duplexes are sort of a similar situation, but no doorman. But also did a huge amount of work improving where people were placed to make sure there are no duplicate addresses, and putting in a couple hundred real storied apartment buildings that there are real histories and floor plans for in New York books and archives, and coverage of rare streets, and a huge improvement to the ethnic name database, the databases I'm using to generate fictional names in a dozen or so ethnicities. But that's one of the parts that I really need a volunteer to do a little bit more help with that. And I added more bridges and tunnels. Okay, but that's the recap. If you're interested in the latest of the directories, you might want to watch the previous session. But today I'm going to talk about some updates, improvements to the actual layouts of the directories. So one of the one of the things I started working on, this is sort of doing this a little bit out of order, but so here's the current subway and bus guide brochure that's part of New York Noir now. It's a reworked real 1930s subway map on the left. Can I make this a little bit bigger? Okay. Sort of abstract version of Manhattan, because real Manhattan is much taller. And so it's trying to present the subway map in a way that's readable. And so I had this brilliant idea to combine the subway map with the bus guide. And so let me just talk about this a little bit. I forget how much I spent in the previous session talking about it, but it's kind of important. So, you know, New York Noir is almost exclusively in Manhattan. There are actually some entries for each of the boroughs of Manhattan, boroughs of New York City outside of Manhattan that you could go to, but most of it's happening in Manhattan. Subways run all through the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, etc. But here I just show them arriving at these outer boroughs, and you don't see the stops in there. All of the subway stations here are the real stations of these real subway lines. So I tried to make the subway as accurate as I could in New York City. The subway is fascinating in New York City. There's fascinating history about private companies all built their own independent trains, and then they got bought out by the city. There's some fascinating history about it. But anyway, subway is an important part of Manhattan. So it's sort of historically accurate in New York Noir. Now, the opposite is true for buses. Buses are sort of an ad hoc thing. They run all over Manhattan at in limited hours, etc. So that's where I made some game simplifications. In New York Noir, the buses exclusively run east-west, and they run sort of in lines every once in a while. You could see it on a different map. But there's a whole logic to how you would talk to a bus driver on a route. So if you know a route, it was on a 14th Street route of the bus, you'd know that there are no station stops, but all through 14th Street, this 14th Street bus would run. And these are the routes. These are the crosstown routes. And so if you know someone got on a bus near 14th Street, this is my little gamification here, where this instruction gives you the game reminders. The rules talk about this, but basically it tells you when they run. And more importantly, it says here, items forgotten on bus can be claimed at the westmost starting point of each bus route, asked to speak with the route's regular driver. And so those westmost points for the buses actually have entries on the map and in the directory, and you could go talk to the driver of that bus. So if you knew someone got on a bus on 14th Street, you could actually go look up in the directory and see on the map where that bus route on 14th Street starts and go talk to that bus driver. Anyway, so I've tried to make this feel like real directory. Anyway, okay, this was all a lead up to saying that when I was going recently in the last couple months and finding these whole sets of ads that used to get made and put on subway lines and bus lines, and they were sort of internal Manhattan, New York City ads, like come to the aquarium. And they were the very stylized, very interesting looking, period appropriate ads that I found a whole bunch of. But one of the things that I kept noticing is they would often talk about the elevated L lines, the elevated lines of the subway. And the way it basically worked was, in the early days of the subways are supposed to be underground, but the early days, they built these elevated lines that were above ground. And there were a whole bunch of lines. There was a 2nd Avenue line, which is this new dotted line that I've added here. There was a 3rd Avenue. There's a 9th Avenue, which you see here, and there's a little bit more. And then over time, the city tore down these elevated lines, which were so iconic, and eventually replaced them with all underground lines. But in our time period in New York Noir in the 30s and so, there were still some elevated lines. And I initially thought, let me just get rid of the elevated lines. It's too complicated for me. It's too confusing to put them in. But because they kept coming up in the history and in all these beautiful ads and stuff, I said, okay, I got to go put back these elevated lines. So I went back and I added 2 of the main elevated lines that survived up until the 30s and so we've got now the elevated 2nd Avenue line, which you can see here in the legend here, and these are the elevated line stops on 2nd Avenue here, and they're now added as proper subway stops in the directories and on the maps. And then here we have the 9th Avenue elevated line, the L. So the L's are now in New York City. People who care about the history of these things will be relieved to hear they are part of New York Noir now. All right, so that's that. You might think it's crazy that so much time is being spent on that, but so be it. Now let's see, how do I get this to go back? Oh, we're not ready for that. Okay. A couple other changes, stuff these are things that we're getting very little bang for a lot of work, very little bang for a lot of buck, but I feel like they're the final touches here. So another one was the, do I not have, I wonder if I put it, yeah, okay. So I made a couple of improvements to some of the 2 of the neighborhoods, really. Does this really show it? What's happening here? Why isn't this? It's not a good view. Is that better? Not really. Okay, well, it's not. It's small, but basically, if you look at the printed versions of the map, and you look at Chinatown, which is the smallest. So here's an old version map. So everything has to fit in these 8.5 by 11 sheets. And so because Chinatown is so wide, it gets crumpled up here. It's sort of a shame. So what I did was I went and carved out, all of the neighborhoods are sort of fuzzy. So I carved out this part here and put that into the Civic Center map. And then I carved a little bit here to get this guy, this little pier, into this area. And so this went into the Civic Center. This got trimmed up a little bit. And so it's a little hard to see on this. I really hoped it would be, probably bring it up on the laptop to make it a little bit better. But basically what we've got now is, because Chinatown is not quite as wide in the maps, it gets enlarged and it's bigger on the page. So just minor stuff, and Civic Center didn't get messed with at all. So Chinatown is the smallest neighborhood in terms of number of blocks and area, but it's sort of important for game design. So anyway, this just gives you some idea of where time is being spent. Okay, now, next up. Okay, so let me show you the directories a little bit and show you some of the fine-tuning that's being done here to the directories. So if we look at, let's just look at the yellow pages maybe as our example here. So here's the previous version of the yellow pages. So there's our index, and then we've got how to find it, and a nice list that I keep tweaking and updating about, like if you were looking for something like radio stations, okay, I should have to find it under broadcasts, just different ways to find things that you might have a hard time with. And then here are our yellow pages, and with our ads, which is all fine. And then occasionally you get something a little bit awkward where a little bit of white space just because we've got a big ad on the next page. It's not the end of the world. Occasionally it's a little unpleasant, like this whole big section here of white space because this ad doesn't fit. Some of these ads are too big, so as our final touch, we probably should go and occasionally, like occasionally the ads are so beautiful, like for private investigators, that these are all real Yellow Page ads, by the way, except for the ones that were the little Easter eggs that got stuck in. But anyway, the point is that sometimes you get these big spaces that are unpleasant to have and a bit of a waste of space. Now, in a real Yellow Pages, if you look at a real Yellow Pages, I mean, people don't see them anymore, but often what will happen is these spaces will be used by little internal ads. Internal ads either for the publishing company or a little fun fact or whatever. So one of the things I did recently is I went and wrote a whole bunch of code to let me customize and put in little ads and blocks. So for example, I guess let me just pull up the Yellow Pages here. Here's a new version of the Yellow Pages. So I did a couple things. First thing is I revamped the front covers a little bit, but now, and there's our table of contents as normal. And there's the how to find it thing. Now, each of these directories has some period pages that were from real phone books. So like how to use the telephone, a little average, just for flavor. This is all just for flavor stuff. From real Yellow Pages from the 20s and 30s. Okay, so there's a little bit of this for flavor. And then we've got all of the directories now have this little page in them. For keeping notes, or maybe for if there's some errata or whatever. Okay, now what you'll see is these are very low res, but I haven't bothered putting them all in yet, but I've put little collections of these internal ads. So here was one from a real ad that says, like, when you're answering the phone, identify yourself. There's all these little blurbs that are in these real Yellow Pages that are what you might consider these little internal little fun things to fill up space. And then I've got these whole little hundreds of little facts, and they're of two forms. There's a whole bunch that are sort of like, did you know how the Bowery got its name? Facts about New York City. The other kinds, though, are now game tips, but phrased as New York City tips or directory tips. So there's lots of little things that are in the FAQs in the rule book, and now I've sprinkled these throughout the directories. So here's one that says, did you know knowing what categories exist and what kinds of shops are in each category will help you locate a business of interest? Familiarize yourself with the taxonomy of this directory. So these are spread throughout. Here's this one. If you're having trouble locating the business category you're interested in, check the how to find it list at the front of this directory. So this was my brilliant idea, that these little places could be filled with all the FAQ reminders, but phrased as sort of New York City tips. And some new ads got inserted for things that I thought were important to have ads for. For example, let me see if I can find some more car ads I added into the Yellow Pages. I still like to add even more. And then there's more little tips. But now, did you know you'll find a complete list of subway stations and bus routes in this directory? So all the little FAQ tips are spread throughout this, which I think is a great idea. Now, you still have these big gaps only because I only when the Yellow Pages is finalized will I know what gaps have to be filled with what. Okay, now, and then there's lots of ads that look, lots of little fillers that look like this. How well do you know your city? France gifted the Statue of Liberty to the United States in 1886 for its centennial. Anyway, you can see lots of little history things as well. All right, now, so I added a whole bunch of ads for like smoking. There's a whole cigarettes there, but it's in tobacconist, and more hotel Yellow Page ads I added. Some of these need to have their contrasts and stuff fixed up, but where is there I don't know how to bring up the okay, so here are some of the little ads that New York City used to put up in the subways for various places, museums. I'm just trying to make these Yellow Pages more entertaining to sort of browse through for a historical feel of the place. I did want to show you some of the cigarette ones because they're pretty cool. It's in tobacconist somewhere. Yeah, so I found lots of ads from the 20s and 30s of these different cigarette companies and stuff. And then we had a volunteer come and add some famous magicians and stuff. We'll talk about all that later. There's some airports and stuff. Okay, so that's the basic idea, and that got done to all of the directories. The reverse directory, which again, the cover got improved a little bit. Reverse directory has a similar thing, a note from the police commissioner on it. It's notes, things. Reverse directory sorted by neighborhood has these little facts about each neighborhood. So this is the Bloomingdale neighborhood section, 35 neighborhoods. And so each neighborhood here has a little history blurb about its neighborhood, how the neighborhood got its name or whatever. Here's the Bowery with its little blurb about the Bowery. And so on. All the directories have that form. The Yellow Pages is the only one that's going to have to be tweaked a little bit to fill in gaps. The rest of them just fit in fine. The White Pages has its own little new flavor text pages in the beginning. How to use the phone, what distance to keep the phone from your mouth, etc. Okay. Oops, that's not what I wanted to. The factoids and tips edition is very good. Maybe a different font face for those tips and tidbits could help them stand out. Yeah, I don't think that would be a bad idea at all. The how to find it page should use the same font as the pages themselves. Yes, I agree. There's some things that are done just because it's easier for me to keep updating it, like the how to find it. The only reason that's in a different font is not on purpose. It's because it's a Google Doc PDF. And so it's because I'm changing it constantly. I don't want to render it in LaTeX, which everything else is. But yes, I agree for final version. Okay. Right. Okay. So I think that's that. Let's see what's next for us. All right, a little bit of update on the cases that exist now for New York Noir. It looks like we've got 18 cases in various stages of development, 9 pretty much finished cases, 3 by me, 3 by Anna, and 3 by Martinez Conradi, a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective case writer, and then 2 more at the bottom here that were written. The early pioneers of writing cases wasn't me. It was Rocky Helton and Water. I think I saw Water in the channel today. Water wrote the first case ever for New York Noir, and those are finished and nice cases, but they need to be at least tested on the new sets of directories and stuff. And then Jonathan Warner wrote a case that has play tested but is working on. Lux just wrote a case in the High and Low campaign, which is the campaign that I've sort of sketched out. And then Anna is working on 2 new cases, and I've got a case in progress. So I think we're on a good track to have a full set. And these are, the other thing to be said is, these cases tend to be sometimes substantially longer than Sherlock Holmes consulting detective cases. In fact, my Foxtrot East case is probably of the length of one of the standalone Sherlock Holmes consulting detective cases like Adventures by Gaslight or Queen's Park, maybe even longer. So some of these are very long multi-part cases. But I think it's shaping up quite well. And once the directories really get locked down, I think it will be even, that will even speed up. So I think by the time New York Noir is really, really ready and polished, there'll be a nice library of cases available. Let me encourage those of you who are considering writing a case or writing a case to get on it, because you'll want to be in that first library when people start learning about it and are able to play it. And I want to talk about how I think we could use a volunteer to sort of wrangle up the authors, sort of maybe standardize the difficulty level and length so that we have a nice sort of chart or listing of cases and the difficulty levels and lengths so people can sort of pick which ones. And I love that, I mean, Anna, our historian, has just really gone crazy writing cases. We played one of them on the channel, which was very good. But Anna has her own sort of campaign and detective and world. And Martinez has done the same thing. Martinez's latest case, he's exploring the idea of magic and a special kind of magic. There's a science behind it. And then I've got my campaign with my contacts. So we're not just writing little individual cases. I think we're building a little world here. Annika says, just finished the demo case, just got stuck a bit on the red herring. Hope that's not too bad. Okay. And Martinez is here. Penguin says, how are you planning to distribute the game? Everything will be if you want to, you can download all the PDFs and play it locally, print it out, or play it online. We are going to find a way to have it printed at some point. So I've got some information about the cases that I wanted to share. But I think I don't want to overload you too much, but you know that my cases are part of a planned sort of 12-part campaign of connected cases of one detective, and Lux has written a case that is set in this same world, but exploring some new ideas. Jonathan Warner wrote a very experimental case. Anna's cases 3 are part of the same trilogy of a same detective. We played one of them, and then she's broken off one of the side characters in that case is getting his own series that she's working on now. And as you might expect from the historian, Anna's cases are very historically minded with tons of documents and photos. I mean, it's all the stuff that I sort of dreamed of for this project is being embraced by Anna in terms of tying into the history of New York City. Should we list the systems that each game uses? Fingerprints, criminal history, events, canvassing? Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. In fact, maybe I can write in some support for that in the online tool. Right now, the tool does keep track of does report for each case, how many days it is and stuff. But I think the idea of which cases use fingerprints, as far as I know, my Foxtrot East is the only case currently that uses fingerprints, but maybe that'll change. And no one has yet used the criminal history directory. So we'll get back to all of that. Okay, and then of course there's the whole play-by-mail cases that we can talk about in the future. Oops. I would recommend Drive-Thru RPG for possible print on demand for it. Yeah, it's a little bit expensive. I think we're going to try to find a way to produce, we may do a Kickstarter, just not to make a profit, but just to get enough pre-orders. The difference between printing 50 copies and printing 500 copies, the difference in price is an order of magnitude. So the more people that could go in together on an order to print up, especially with the box and all the binding, the significantly cheaper it will be. So we might do a Kickstarter just so that we can try to get as many orders at once as possible. Okay, so that's that. Website updates. Okay, let me show you a little bit about some improvements to the website. Let me see if I can do this properly. Can I get this laptop to show? Yes, okay. So here we are on my laptop here. It's just easier for me to do. Here's the New York Noir website. Nothing fancy here on the front page, but here is the website as it exists. This is nynoir.org. You can go and access this site. Here are games available. Now I'm logged in as admin, so I'm seeing some games that are not public and not finished that you wouldn't. I guess I can reload this here. Okay, so there you've got The Past is a Crooked Game, The Wrong Book, and Foxtrot East. These are my cases. You can see a little bit of the stats here. This is my demo short case to teach you this system. And then The Wrong Book, 174 leads, 192K. And then Foxtrot East, which is my super long one, 18 documents, 25 images, 7 days. 382K. This gives you some idea of the length of the case, and you can compare it to, for example, Anna's case. Anna is trying to compete with me about making the largest case. There's Jonathan's case. And here's Martinez's case. I guess Anna didn't make her other cases public. Here's Martinez's 3 cases. And I've showed you before the whole system here. If you click on it, this is what would be available to, this is what is available now to someone who wants to download it. Here are versions you can download, one meant to be printed and one meant to be played if you're going to use a tablet. So 1 lead per page, so you don't get spoilers, and then some instructions about which directory set you need. Okay, and then if you were an author, you could edit it, and this is where you would edit your case. Although this is the actual demo case, so don't worry too much about it. This is the tool that produces the PDFs. And I've added some new features to that, like it'll automatically fetch from the Google Doc, but this is just for authors. You can see there's the uploaded files for this case. Anyway, so there are the games and some little bit of improvements to that. Here's general downloads. So this is the zip file, the huge zip file you would get for all the directories, white pages, yellow pages, etc. Other downloads, including some directories that are a little unusual, the sheets you would print out if you were going to play a game, etc. I have now also made this little bookshelf area. This just makes it a little easier for someone to come and browse and check out the game. So there's it's basically just a little PDF browser in here. But if you hit this website, you just want to quickly look. Here are the rules. Here's the full rule book, right? And then here are the actual directories here. Here's the white pages. Yellow pages. So everything is here. So if you just wanted to quickly hit this website, you could actually access all of the content. I mean, it's the same thing as downloading it and reading it on your PDF browser or whatever, but here it all is in nice, easy form. So the latest stuff is here, a couple extra directories. Here's the fingerprint directory. This little unusual street guide. There's the research guide of where you would go for certain kinds of information. Additional maps of the buses and the outer boroughs, etc. Okay, and then we've got, here are the sheets, the case tracking log, the day log. Anyway, just in a nice form so that people who are looking for something don't have to figure out which file do I download. Of course, you can download and print from here, etc. A couple of guides to writing cases. The one I like that I wrote is this one, although it could use some improvement, but this is my sort of essays on how you would write a good case, how you would use the criminal history to try to tempt someone into trying to use it for a case, and a little essay on reality and fiction. Okay, so that's the bookshelf. The map I'm going to show you in a bit and go more about it. There's also now a wiki. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a wiki is, it's basically just a collection of pages that can be community edited. And let me show you how we started using that right away. So Lux, who's in the channel and on the Discord, has been writing a case set in the world of my protagonist, whose name is Jack Deverell, and in my campaign. And he was asking me, like, when was his father born? Would it be accurate if I said this happened? When was he a PI? When was he a police officer? So that's exactly what a wiki can be useful for. So I've just started filling out some of this stuff. Like, here are some of the contributors in various ways to the project, and a list of our playtesters, and then here's where we can keep sort of lore of the world. So in my campaign, this is just a little timeline rundown of information available, sort of canonical canon for my universe, my alternate universe, where my cases take place and where Lux's case takes place. So anyone can edit these pages. It's a wiki. So you just go here, as long as you have an account on the site, you could edit this page and make some changes. So I do hope that, for example, I do hope that Anna goes and fills in the details of the lore of her world, so that maybe if someone wanted to write a case set in that world with Anna's characters, if Anna wants to, they could go check this out. And similarly, Martinez is writing this whole new science of magic in his cases called lexicographic resonance. I hope he'll go and edit this page and fill it out. So we have our wiki now, and I hope the community, especially as the game gets released, will help fill out some of this stuff. So that's our wiki. About is the same as before, and then the admin is just my administration access to the website. All right, so that's that. All right, let's check in with the chat, and then we're going to have the serious discussion. Maybe in a Kickstarter, you could choose if you want the cases as well. Yes, I think that's right. I think that's right. Annika says, only started watching the channel in November, but I'm so impressed with what you as a community have made on this game. Thank you. Will the cases be inside the box, or are they all print and play? That is a great question that we're trying to figure out. I think here's our dilemma. this large box here, this heavy large box, is large enough to fit all the directories and the content and maybe 1 or 2 cases. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, here is the Foxtrot East case. It's 214 pages of multiple columns. All right, so the problem is that in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, a case is a little pamphlet, a little flat-laying 20-page thing. And here the cases are much longer, bigger. And if we try to include a whole set of those, it would get huge. So I think basically, and it wouldn't fit in a box. So I think what the idea is going to be that the core box is going to have all the materials to play. Maybe a demo case, maybe 1 or 2 other cases. And then, as Anna was saying, what it would be nice is if we could get the authors that want their cases produced to make a box of cases, something like that. But also, because the cases get played once and only once, and then you're done with it, I think they're better candidates for print and play. I've also done some reviews about why print and play for cases is great, because you can make notes on the pages as you're playing, circle stuff, keep track. So I think printing the cases is not the worst thing, but I do like the idea for those who want to be able to buy a box of cases. And I think part of my obligation and the obligation of this project is to do right by the authors of cases. So if there's an interest, we can try to get the cases produced, or at least on demand available. Or maybe just pick a set of a handful of cases that can be included in the box, as in the main box, as sort of teaser cases. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the major part. A nice map of New York City would be great. It would have to be fold out because it's so long. Annika says, I printed the demo as 2 pages per side. Double-sided is more convenient to play on my small table. Yeah, I mean, most of us who like this kind of game want the things printed out. And so it is a dilemma, but it is everything. The tools for producing the PDFs are also designed to make PDFs that are as convenient as possible to play on a tablet or on a monitor. So all the PDFs have links that you can click and nice indexes and all that. All right, so now we're going to talk about the map tools and a little bit of a tricky subject to talk about. Let me have my coffee nearby. What happens if you don't have a printer? Well, like I said, we're going to have ways to get it printed out. But if you have it's expensive to have this stuff bound. I know some people have gone to a print shop to have it bound. You can always play it on a tablet or on your computer as well. Don't forget, you could print out just the 3 sheets with the check boxes and to keep track of your case, and do everything else on a device if you wanted to. All right, let me go to this screen here and see if we can have a discussion about the... Kona says, I like the idea of the core box and then have expansions for each author. Yeah, I think that the ideal world would be to organize boxes of expansions. So if Martinez writes 10 cases, we could have a box of Martinez's cases, and if Anna writes 10 cases, we could have a box of Anna's cases, and that would be quite fun to have, you know, on the bookshelf, the core box, and then equally sized, you know, boxes that line up on the shelf, a box of my high and low campaign, a box of Anna's cases. So any author that can get themselves up to 10 cases, or we can combine, like if we can have a box for the one-off cases. So Martinez might have his own box, Anna would have his own box, and then we could have a box of miscellaneous cases. How would they do that? I'm not sure if you're responding to this question, but I don't think there's, my view about this in terms, let me talk very quickly about this for money. My view of all this is that there's no money to be made in this stuff, and I'm not interested in making money. And in general, this is a good segue to this. I am not interested in owning anyone's content here. So Martinez and Anna, they own their cases. I don't want to own them. They're being made available for free because Anna and Martinez want to make them all available for free. The only thing that I might help do is try to facilitate wrangling them up and helping them organize them however we print and bind the main core box. Would be nice to have them produced in a similar fashion. None of this is going to be cheap because there's so much binding here, but on the other hand, it's not using tokens. It can be produced all locally. So I don't know what the final costs are going to be, but I don't think anyone can make a profit on any of this, and I'm not interested in making profit. If we do a Kickstarter, it will be just to reduce the costs and then basically sell everything at cost. Okay, now let's talk about 47 minutes. Okay, I can see this is going to go long because it's going to take us a while to do this next section. So let me catch my breath here and talk about what I've spent the last month doing and why. All right, let me see how I have this slide organized. This is a little bit of a sensitive, tricky area. I'm going to try to handle it in a sensitive way. So, discussion of what went wrong. Okay, about a year ago, a programmer came into the Discord. You know, there's a Discord for the Co-op for Two channel and a Discord for New York Noir stuff. And this person, Peter Wright, created something very cool. And I've talked about it quite a bit. And many of you who have played New York Noir have used the tool that Peter made and have seen it go through its evolutions. So what Peter did is he made an online version of the map and the directories that were searchable. It was a slightly more general tool. It wasn't just New York Noir. It was to explore a little bit, putting Sherlock Holmes online and searchable directory, and he experimented with some other stuff, like being able to play some games online. It was very cool from the first version in a year ago. And then he and I and others on the Discord went through a lot of iterations of feature requests and ideas, and Peter did it all on his own, and no one else helped code it. It was a joy to see it develop and see it become a more and more useful tool. It was sort of shocking when I first saw it because it had occurred to me earlier to make an online searchable version of the directories, but it hadn't really occurred to me that you could make a nice usable visual map that you could explore. And I had lots of requests, and some Peter said, no, I'm not interested in doing that, and some he did. And we had lots of talks about improving it, and he did it. And then there were some big things that I suggested be done to make the user interface better, and they didn't appeal to Peter, so he didn't work on it, but then eventually he actually did implement a whole bunch of it. This is just a long-winded way of saying that the tools evolved and developed and became really sort of they became super useful in ways that I didn't initially anticipate how useful they would be. And from my standpoint, one of the ways they were so useful is that as an author writing cases, there are things you have to do as an author, like think about, okay, what are the other places that would be near this person? Where would they go? What could they go somewhere else? Or just to get ideas. There's lots of things as an author being able to search online and visually is much more efficient than using the directories to search, which are sort of limited by what you want the player to have to struggle with. Part of how I got around that is I create a whole bunch of other directories that are useful only for authors. Anna has used some of those. But from my standpoint, the map tools were much more pleasant. But they were also useful for players, especially for playtesting. A lot of players of this game just want the physical hands-on stuff, but especially for playtesting, being able to do everything online is just quicker. Okay. So now you see what's here. I say what went wrong. So now I'm going to tell you sort of what went wrong. So what went wrong was, maybe that's not the right way to say it. Well, let me just tell you what happened. So at the beginning of January, I had a discussion with Peter. And basically what I said was, I'd like to put your tools into the New York Noir website so that people who are on New York Noir dealing with all these different things can access the map and the tools there. And it could stay on your website, but it could embed it on the website. I don't want to take away any of the credit or ownership. I mean, this was something he did purely as a volunteer project on his own. And then I had some suggestions about, there was a bunch of stuff on the page that was for other uses, and it was a little distracting. And then I said, and then secondarily, it would be nice to be able to extend the software going forward. If there's some other ideas, I'd like to be able to contribute it. Would you consider open sourcing this? How do you feel about all that stuff? And Peter said basically, which is completely reasonable, but he basically said, I'm not interested in, I don't want to open source it. I want to keep it on my website. I don't want it embedded in the New York Noir website. I have a different vision. Basically, he had a slightly different vision for the project, which is completely reasonable, and I completely understand. And I think many of us programmers are a little bit of control freaks. That's sort of how we got into this business. And it's sort of like you're using a program and it does 99% of what you want, but like the menu is off a little bit and you're like, all right, that's it. I have to write my own. So, but basically it put me in a very awkward position with regards to New York Noir. Because here's this tool that I love what he's created. I'm so appreciative of what he did. But I'm in this situation where I have no control over it. It's hosted on another site. It could disappear at any time. I can't add features to it. Its focus isn't really New York Noir. New York Noir is supported, but so there's the question of, in its current state, worrying about it, and then worrying about going forward. He sort of created this thing that has opened my eyes to how useful this tool and future evolutions of it would be as part of New York Noir. Long story short, we decided that the best thing would be, the proper thing would be for me to rewrite the tools, for me to write new versions of the tools that I could develop further. And it was a very hard decision, not mainly for the amount of work, but just because it was clear there were going to be some hard feelings. And I would have had hard feelings if I was in his position too. He worked very hard on this stuff. He had his own vision for it, and it wasn't just New York Noir. It was a more general tool, but still New York Noir was the primary use of it at the time. And this decision would now mean that we wouldn't be using those tools. But it felt to me like it was sort of a Band-Aid that was just, that if it didn't get pulled off now, was only going to get scarier going forward when there were features that I felt needed to be added, or if it disappeared one day. So anyway, at the beginning of January, I bit the bullet and spent basically the last 3 or 4 weeks doing nothing but writing new versions of the map and online search tools. And so that's what I'm going to show you here. I apologize for that long discussion. You can tell it's sort of important to me that I describe it in a way that's fair. Peter is not here to, I don't think, to offer his opinions on it. I feel bad about it. I also feel like it had to be done, but I think it should be said that that whole thing could have been avoided if this was something I had more experience in. I think in retrospect, it's obvious that very early on in such a project, Peter and I should have had a conversation about, well, what does the future of this tool you're working on look like? And what is going to be needed if it does become a part of New York Noir, become useful? What is its future? I guess I sort of assumed it was going to be open source, but we never had that conversation. I think that's mostly on me. And part of it is just, two people not wanting to have control, not being comfortable having things out of their control. So anyway, let's take a look at the new tools, and let's see if I can, do we need to, actually, let me see, what else do I have here? Do I have a summary of what happened? I talked about the history. This is all stuff I've just talked about. So I haven't used any of his code, but I should say that I'm going to spend quite a bit in today's session talking about programming, especially the AI coding and stuff, and that played a huge role in doing this. But I do want to say something that programmers non-programmers may not know. A huge amount of time that gets spent writing software is not just writing the tool to do what you know it has to do, but sort of missteps, going down one path and then realize, okay, it shouldn't be done that way. I have to rewrite it. I have to redo the code. Let me try it this way. So a huge amount of the work in writing a piece of software is the fact that you're exploring how it should work, what it should look like, what it should do, what's the scope of things it has to do. So even though, I think this is what I need to give Peter credit, even though I have not used any of his code, the fact that he evolved the system and through lots of interactions with me about how it should be structured and how the user interface should be, but the fact that we figured these things out and he had to figure it out and go on this path to get to this final version made a huge difference in me being able to tackle this project. So I definitely benefited from him pioneering the way to his version of the tools. Now, my tools work a little differently. I've done some things differently, but I did benefit hugely from his work. I hope he sees that as a contribution, as his work not being in vain. But okay, so there's that. So let me give you a little bit of a tour of this new map tool here. Let's see if I can bring it up. All right, so here is the website now, and we're going to click on the map page here. So here is our map of the New York Noir world, Manhattan here. On the left is our map with all of the buildings. This is Logan's art. So you can see here Central Park. Below Central Park here is Times Square, and that's this neighborhood in the center here. So you can see you can browse the map here, and on the right are the search tabs. And so we've got the white pages. So these first three directories are meant to mirror the directories in the printed version. So you've got your white pages. So if I search for Brown, we've got people named Brown and businesses that start with the word Brown. This is not Brown anywhere in their name, just what you would look up if you looked up Brown in the white pages. Here they are here. You can see each item gives you its lead number, its street address, and its neighborhood address. If I click on it, we're going to zoom to it. Here it is. Here's Brown and Brothers Caterers. Again, I can hover over it to get its street address and its lead. Here's another one over here. Brown is a Brown psychoanalyst. As I click on these, it'll go to them. In fact, I can just page through them. In fact, let me zoom out a little bit so it's not having to readjust each time. So I can scroll down here and you can see as it goes to them. Here they are. Okay, so all of the three first directories are mirrors of the physical print directories. This is what a player would use here. So Yellow Pages is a little bit different. We've got categories here. In fact, let me just select hotels. So here are hotels. You can see there they are on the map. Lots of hotels in Times Square, but they're really everywhere. And we can mouse over and get the hotels. Here they are here. Some of the hotels have Yellow Page, have ads in the Yellow Pages. You saw them. Here they are here. If I click on this, it'll expand it and give me a nice larger version of the ad. And when you expand a place, it highlights it on the map and does that little flash and gives you these buttons. So the buttons will let you go and zoom in on a place. That's what this one does. This one lets you bookmark it. This one will let you copy it to the clipboard. This lets you set it as an anchor. I'll talk about that in a second, and I'll talk about that last button later. So anyway, that's the Yellow Pages. Reverse directory is what you look up to find what's at a specific location. So here we can just click on the map. So if I just click this 57 block of Times Square, you can see here's Times Square 57, and here are all the things that are on this block. So we've basically got the subway, the Beacon cafeteria, and so on. That green one is for canvassing around the block. Here, if I click here, we'll see that police precinct somewhere here. New York Times, sorry, NYPD Times Square precinct, then the RCA building, which has a bunch of little sub things on different floors. Let's see if we can find one with an apartment building. Okay, so that's what these are here, these apartment buildings here. Here's the Bownet apartment building and the residences of the apartment building on different floors. Okay, so that's the main directories for white pages, yellow pages, and reverse directory. We've got a couple other things we can do from the map here. We can choose between tile sets. So for New York Noir, there's 3 tile sets. This is the default one. We've got a minimal one that does away with all the building art. This was actually an idea of Peter's to do a map without the building art version, so it's easier to spot stuff. We've also got a new tile that shows the subway lines. You can see the different subway lines running through. You can see they line up with where there's a subway station, etc. So let me go back to the minimal view here. New, I added the ability to toggle through some effects. Again, it's easier to see if the place gets busy, like here are hotels, or maybe if you've got bookmarks, it can get so busy that it's kind of hard to spot things. It's not so hard here, actually. Maybe a better demonstration would be, I guess maybe let's find something that's got, bring up lots of results. Okay, anyway, so you could switch through some effects like making a low contrast map. That's not very useful, is it? Low saturation. So you can switch to a couple of views that make it easier for you to spot your bookmarks and your people by dimming down the map in various ways. In fact, if we go to the options here, some people, I got a request for a dark theme. So there's a couple themes here you could set. So here's everything in a dark theme. Doesn't quite do it for me. And a more compact theme if you're pressed for real estate, screen real estate. Let's go back to our normal theme for a second. Let me just show you a couple other things. I'll turn off this layer effect here. Okay, we can reset the view. We can zoom in to just the places on the map, which isn't going to do anything for such a large set. But what if I do a small set? So this button just says zoom in to all the places on the map. So if they were just spread within a neighborhood, it would zoom into those. This result overlays is sort of important, but a little bit more for advanced use. Let me show you how you might use that. Let's say we're making a case and the musical chairs talent agency was important, so I'm going to bookmark that. As you can see, it gets a little bigger here. And then maybe Sam Ash music, I bookmark. Okay, so I've bookmarked 2 places here. If I go to the bookmarks tab, there they are. And here's Chemical Bank that I bookmarked a long time ago. So there's my 3 bookmarks. In fact, if I click this, it'll zoom into those. Oops. Okay, so there's my 3 bookmarks, which are available on the Bookmarks tab. Now, if I go and do a search here on the white pages, those bookmarks won't show up. Let's say we do Smith. Maybe we'll do something, let me do like this, Cumberland Hotel. Okay, so you can see no bookmarks. Bookmarks are here. All the tabs are independent. It's like keeping the white pages open to the tab. So there's the Cumberland Hotel on the white pages. If I was on, there's hotels on my yellow pages. Maybe in the reverse directory, I was looking at this neighborhood here. Okay, so white pages, yellow pages, reverse directory, and then bookmarks. But bookmarks could be important. And maybe while you're looking at the white pages, you want to see your bookmarks available. So on the layers view, you can say, okay, even no matter what page I'm on, show me also overlay my bookmarks. And they're semi-transparent. So one of the options you could change in the options dialog is how transparent to make the items from the other layers. So that's what this layers view is. This is our neighborhood regions view. So you could say, well, I'm going to focus my case now on Times Square. I'm going to do some searching around Times Square. So you could select it. And now it's highlighted Times Square and just dimmed all the areas outside of it. Just to help you focus on that. And that is our segue to the advanced search. Now, so these first 3 are, players could use these. It's not cheating. These searches are restricted to what you could find with the regular directories. So you can't search for someone's first name here because that would be inappropriate. But the advanced tab would let you do all of those kinds of things. So there's a big warning here that says this is for the case authors, not for players. So I am going to go ahead and enable it. I'm going to bring up the option. Here's the authors tab. I can say I'm going to enable the advanced search tab and enable this thing that shows extra category information. So now I have the advanced search is available. Now you can just sort of type things. So if I type someone's first name, like Jesse, okay. No Jesse. Well, that might be because I'm filtered within the neighborhood. So let me turn this off. Okay. So here's people with the first name Jesse. And you could search for other stuff here too. Like you could search for Broadway. And now we're going to get matches to addresses on Broadway. Should it be hidden? No, I like the idea of having it here but disabled so I can give a nice warning. So you've got a little marker here. You could filter to the neighborhood you've selected. So I could go ahead and say, okay, let me go to Chinatown. And this is East Broadway in Chinatown, whatever. You could search here by category, like I could say banks. Okay, so here's banks in Chinatown or banks everywhere. So if I clear my neighborhood selection, that will go away. Here are the banks everywhere. Here's banks in the Civic Center. Not too many, 3. And we could restrict the search in here. Okay, so there's that. And then, of course, I could go in here and bookmark the Immigrant Savings Bank if I wanted to remember it. Okay, so that's the advanced search. Now, the advanced search, whatever you type here is going to be looked for in names, addresses, categories, etc. But actually, the advanced search can do a lot more. It's got a full query system. In fact, I'm going to go, since it's so hard for me to remember, I'm just going to bring up the help here so we can see it. So you can search on any of these specific fields. You've got some examples here. just so you could see, okay, show me banks near subways. Show me people near subways, for example. Show me people near police precincts. Show me people who live in a duplex. Show me places within 100 feet of some of my bookmarks. So for example, here, let's look at everyone who lives in a duplex. So here's everyone who lives in a duplex, filtered by my neighborhood or by the whole map. Let me turn off this neighborhood selection. So here are people living in duplexes, 781 of them. Remember, a duplex, these are all going to be like little doubles, right? Here's Duncan, who lives in the lower half of the building, and Weinbaum, who lives in the upper half. You can clear it. Anyway, all kinds of stuff. Here is, you can write combination things. You can say all people, all banks that are also on Broadway, or all places that are on 14th Street or Broadway, etc. You can say, show me all the German ethnicities. Here are all the people in Manhattan of German descent, German names. Okay, so the advanced search thing is quite powerful, if especially useful to authors or players who want to cheat. Okay, our scene says so many abandoned properties. Yeah, if I type in abandoned, so here are all the abandoned properties. There are a lot of abandoned properties, aren't there? Okay, so that's the advanced search tab. Now I showed you, let's bookmark this one just for fun. Okay. Now I showed you the bookmarks. So here are the places I've bookmarked. I can just quickly scroll them. If you were writing a case, these might be the places that are useful, or if you were playing a case, the places that were useful. You can see this information here is only available because I clicked to enable it in the advanced. Now, on the S tab, these are saved searches. So if there's certain searches you do often, like some of those advanced searches, you could save them here. And here's a feature I'm pretty happy about. Here's our history tab. So all while we've been using it, every time I click on a place, visit a place, or run a search, it gets added to the history. And I could revisit these places at any time. So, for example, we went to Sam Ash. We went to the musical chairs. We did a search for people who live in duplexes. So if you clicked on something you forgot, you could go here. And in fact, you could bookmark and save searches here. Let's say, okay, lives in duplex. That's a useful search. I want to do that often again. So I've bookmarked save searches. So now if I go to the save searches, that search is now in my saved searches. All this stuff is remembered across uses in your local browser. Here was the search we did on the advanced tab for people with the first name of Jesse and so on. Okay, so that's the history, and from the history you can add things to your bookmarks, etc. All of these bookmarks, history, whatever, can also be filtered. I think it's just filtering it by name. Okay, there's that. All of them have a little drop-down menu here where you can delete it, but you can also export, and in the case of bookmarks, import and export. Let's see. Let's see if there are any more questions, then I'll show you a couple more advanced things you can do here. Cases we wrote using Peter's tools won't be adversely. Yeah, oh, this is the same version of the data. The data is not changed. Importing bookmarks from cases is a godsend. Do you know how big the database is? Is it downloaded or served from the server? Can you search a person's name with their ethnicity in the advanced tabs? Absolutely. You can write any and or combination filters. You could say, show me all people that are Jewish in this neighborhood who live near a bank. You could do you could do anything you want, all combinations. So if you've got some idea for a case, like someone's going to rob a bank that's near a subway and they live in an apartment building, you could do it all. You could easily do it. There's help and discussion for all of that. Okay, so let me show you a couple more things, and then I'm going to show you the importing bookmarks and stuff from the cases, because I think there's some things here that are going to be especially useful to authors. All right, so let me show you one thing I didn't show you. So I showed you bookmarks, and I showed you could do an advanced search that says find me things near bookmarks. But let me show you one other thing. Let's imagine that we were writing a case. Let's bring up banks. Okay, let me clear this neighborhood thing. Okay, let's imagine we were writing a case that focused on Citibank Farmers Trust. Okay, so I could bookmark it, that's fine, but you can also set an anchor. So I'm going to set Citibank Farmers Trust as my current anchor. There can only be one anchor at any given time. It's highlighted in blue. It stays on the screen no matter what tab you're in. So that's the first benefit, is when you set an anchor, it's always visible no matter what tab you go to. The other thing you'll notice now is that every tab I go to shows the distance to the anchor. So if I now search for people with the name Brown, every person lists now, in addition, their distance to the anchor. From the Advanced tab, we can actually ask it to sort by distance to the anchor. So for example, if I search for subway, now I've got a list of the subways that are sorted by distance from my anchor. So here I am scrolling through. Here's the closest, next closest, next closest, next closest, and so on. So Anchor has multiple purposes. One is it's always visible, prominent on the screen. The other use is you can run searches on it. And another use is you get distances and can sort by distance. So if you had your, maybe you were making, you knew who your criminal was. He was this guy here, Wagner. You'd set him as the anchor, and then you'd say, okay, now let me think, where would he be going to? What subway would he get on? Where would he be eating? Probably his closest restaurant is Gafanti restaurant. That's probably the restaurant he eats at, and so on. That kind of stuff. Okay, so Anchor can be useful if you're working on a specific thing, and you can make searches based on Anchor. So you could say, like, find me the closest restaurant near a bank and close to the anchor, and then you could choose a new anchor and then run that search again, and it would be, that search would be tied to the new anchor. So anchors are sort of an advanced tool. Okay. And there was a question here, a couple questions here related. How big the database is it downloaded or served from the server? So everything we're looking at here is running in the local browser. It downloads the entire database, and the only thing it's fetching from the server are the different map tiles as you zoom around to different levels. But essentially, you could run it all offline. once you downloaded it. There are about 10,000 people in 10,000 places. The whole database is maybe 10 megabytes or so. It's a GeoJSON database, so it's not running on the it's not a server database. It's all downloaded and accessed locally, and very primitive sort of use of database. It would all, none of this would work if you had 200,000 places, but it all works fine with 20,000 or so. Penguin says, I'm having trouble using the advanced tab. How should I fix my issues? You should come to the Discord and I will help you out figuring out how to configure how to write advanced searches, and I'm happy to add features. All right, I wanted to show a couple of things. Let me see what my list here is. Okay, quick couple of things. So we looked at the options here. You can change the look of the markers. I'll add a couple more in time. You can import all of your bookmarks, all of your settings, all of your configuration, and export and import it to a new browser. You can delete everything that's in your, nothing is saved on the server here. This is all in local browser store, but you could delete it all. There's a little log if there were any errors. Okay, so that's that. You can also switch between worlds or configurations. So right now, there's just the version 5 data and a slightly older database. There's a version just as proof of concept of the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective database, although I was talking with Rob about this database not being, this data set for Sherlock Holmes not being super accurate. So Rob may be working on that a little bit. You can even switch to the old Sleuth Publications map for those with some historical interest in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And then I'm going to go back to New York Noir now. And then there's one more thing I wanted to show you that I think would be, yes, I am going to record some tutorials on how to use all these tools for a player and for an author. Okay, so I wanted to show you one more cool thing. So let me go to the bookmarks and let me delete all my bookmarks here. Oh, what's happening? Okay, maybe I'll delete all my history here as well. Why is it doing that multiple times? Okay, a little bit of a bug there. Okay, now, let's say you were going to play my demo case. The past is a crooked game. Okay, so I'm going to do something here. I'm going to copy the link, the URL to this PDF of that. Okay, now the demo case is an easy case. I'm not really going to spoil, I'm not going to spoil too much, but let's say we go into the white pages. Let's say I'm playing this case. In fact, we could just get it out here, I suppose, to bring it up in another tab if we were playing it. Okay, well, let me change my mind. Let me not do that. Okay, so if I was playing, if I had it printed out in front of me, in fact, I do have it printed out here, but maybe one of the first places you go is the Tellerico and Brother Bake Shop. Okay, so imagine you're playing this case or you're the author writing it. So there is the Tellerico and Brother Bake Shop. Now, if you look over here at this little book icon, this will zoom me into it if I wasn't. All right, let me click this. Okay, when you click this, it opens up a new tab here, a casebook tab, a little PDF reader. I'm going to load in from URL that case. So here is the demo case, which I can which I can page down through and click on links, whatever. However, now if I click on a location in the search and click this book, you will see it jumps to that lead. So basically, you can play the case through here by loading up the case in this casebook tab. When you do a search, it will jump to it. It'll jump to that entry on that page. It works whether it's double column or single column. It doesn't care. Now, so whether you want to play a case this way or not, as an author, being able to quickly read the entries is very useful. Now, watch this. If I go to bookmarks and I go to import, so the bookmark thing is very flexible. You could export bookmarks, you can import bookmarks. Bookmarks could be in any form. Like you could just have a plain text list of addresses, of numbers, but you can also paste in the source of your casebook file. So if you're the author of The Past is a Crooked Game, I could go paste in the source of my thing and it will extract the leads, but I can also grab it from the PDF. So here it is, grabbed all the leads from that case. And here they are. These are a little bit of spoilers, but now let me import them. So now this is a demo case, so I'm not worried about spoiling anything. Now here are all the leads in that case. And I could jump to them. I don't know if they're all in here, but I can jump to them and see them on the map here. So if I was writing this case, I could explore my case from the map from here and investigate, like, oh, okay, this is someone, I need to go do something around here. Anyway, I'm giving you this a little bit of spoiler, but I think it's for the demo case. I think it's okay. So you probably you should definitely not be doing this if you are playing a case. But if you're authoring a case, there's a whole bunch of tools now to make it very easy for you to jump around your case. All right. My only question is, how the heck was this programmed in 1 month? Well, that leads us to our second related subject, which is the topic of AI coding. Let me just answer a few questions here before we go on. What's a DNAME? The DNAME is the display name. That would be like a person's full name or a business name. But Penguin is asking questions about how to trying to use the advanced search. So that'll be for the tutorials. Okay, Luxa makes playing or playtesting cases efficient. Yes, that's right. My only question, I wish I knew when I played Anna's current case. Have a way in a casebook to specify if a lead should be mapped. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. The Spaminite says, one useful thing as a player is to highlight a text in a case to record it as a note. I am going to add a place to record notes and automatically record. It just occurred to me, one of the uses that's so useful for this and for playtesting would be if an author could get a list from playtesters of all the places they tried to go that didn't have leads for the author to consider going. So what I am going to start doing is I'm going to make a new note tab and have it automatically add a little time-stamped entry every time you try to look up a place in the book that isn't in the book. That way, when you finish playtesting a case, you could give the author, here are all the places I tried to go that I thought might have entries in the book that didn't. I think that will make life a little bit easier for coders, for authors. All right, now I wanted to, so I've showed you all the map and online search tool. It's mostly for certain lead numbers that I do not want mapped when I import the case. I think you mean even for yourself, you don't want them mapped because maybe they're of a different type. So what I didn't show you, one thing I didn't show you, I'll just show you very quickly. Let's say you're writing a case here. Let me just pick a fictional place here. Let's play Blue Wave Ventures. Let's say that was important. If you click this little pencil, you can come give it a special name like victims. How about the murder scene? And you could say, I'm going to customize the appearance of this little bookmark. I'm going to have a call out, and I'm going to use a little icon here. Make it blue. And we'll make it a little bigger. And I'll make some notes like, remember to put the murder weapon nearby. Okay, so when I save this, what you'll see is now it shows up on the map. Looks like maybe I made it too big. Okay, so now it shows up on the map with that custom label and call out. So a nice way while you're writing a case or playing a case to make little annotations on the map. And in fact, you'll see that if we go to that place, it puts in the listings that custom title I gave it. And that'll be in wherever you see it. So in your bookmarks, you'll now see that custom title I added. Even if you searched for it here, it would come up with that custom title that I've added to it. Okay, let's move on because this is becoming a long session. So I wanted to talk a little bit about use of AI coding. Let's see if I've got a slide for this. All right, maybe I'll cut this a little bit shorter than, oh, well, I did have a question, but we'll deal with that later. Okay, let's talk about AI coding for a second. Some of you know my background is in AI, and specifically with neural networks. I went to graduate school for it. But the AI has taken off like crazy. The technology that has come about in the last decade is phenomenal. And I've been using a little bit of the AI programming tools in a very limited fashion, mostly for tinkering with doing some of the LaTeX layout code. LaTeX is an old software tool from the 70s, very esoteric, weird, obscure stuff. And so over the last year, I've occasionally used it for little pieces. But for this online search and map tools, I used it extensively. I used Claude, which is one of the more powerful, well-regarded AI programming tools, but it's not the only one. And I do not think I can express how shocked I was at the quality, at the overall experience. And I mean, basically, I have spent the last 3 weeks, month, working on those tools I just showed you from morning to sleep, like 12-hour days. So several hundred hours were spent, at least a couple hundred hours, 200 plus hours of my time coding that. However, I think probably very rough estimate, but probably without the AI tools, without using Claude, maybe it would have taken me 3-4 times as long. So you're talking about getting something done in a month that would otherwise have taken 3 or 4 months. I mean, that's how huge using the AI tools were. And there's a number of reasons for that. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much. And it's not just, I mean, the reason that the impact is so huge is because the part that the AI coding tools were particularly useful for me, were things that I would have had to go spend hours researching how to use some library. For example, the Open Layers library that does the actual mapping, that's a library I'm not familiar with. And I would have to learn how to do that. I would be writing inefficient, poorly code that was not the code that you would write if you were experienced using the library. So I've made a sort of slide here for some of my observations of using these tools. And there are people in the Discord and in the chat here that have more experience with these tools. But I was walking around for the last few weeks just with my jaw on the floor, shocked, just absolutely shocked at how good these tools have gotten so quickly and how amazingly practically useful they are. So I just made a little list here to talk about. That's the bottom line picture, is how good it's gotten. But I think there's some little subtleties I do want to mention. If you're a programmer, I mean, if you're not a programmer, you can start writing stuff now with the AI. That's how good it is from start to finish. But there are a couple of reasons why I think it's not. I have good friends who are coders who have a little bit more mixed experience with it and a little more use cases where it's not as useful as it was for me here. So your mileage may vary, but I did have a couple of observations. The first part is this part. It's not just that it's writing code. It's writing the code. It's writing code that's monotonous, that's error prone. It's writing code and documenting it well. So that means it's not just that it's saving me a month of work in the generic in the generic sense of work. It's saving me from the most frustrating, the most monotonous, the most error-prone work, and letting me do the most creative, interesting work. It's hugely beneficial for working with libraries that you're not familiar with. Not just because you'd have to spend hours researching it, but you'd spend hours researching it and be writing code that's not sort of what an experienced native person would write who knew the way to use the library most efficiently, because the AI does know. It has studied the way that code should be written for that library. And in this case, the Open Layers stuff is a great example. Lots of cases where I was like, how do I do this? Like, it's not a matter of writing code. It's a matter of, I don't know what library functions I would call, what data structures I would call. I would have to go research that, write it, experiment, figure out how to deal with the way to make these API calls. You're talking about days of time get solved in 5 minutes by the AI. There's a whole other class of things that the AI can solve that would take you days. There are lots of little weird bugs that happen. A huge part of time spent coding is you spend like, a couple hours writing some interface, and then you spend 8 hours figuring out why there's some one weird little bug that you don't understand what's causing it and why. because it's some oddity of CSS or the user interface or some library. The AI is very good at that, frequently shockingly good when you think like, how can I even describe this in a way it's going to understand what I'm talking about to fix this bug? And I can't tell you how many times I've been like, right into the AI, you're sitting there, you're saying like, look, something weird's happening with this tab when I switch to it, or when I resize this thing, it's messing something up. And the AI comes back and he says, this is some known weird, known bug with this known, some side effect of this. And here's how to fix it. Do you want me to fix it? And I'm thinking, that would have been 2 days for me to figure that out. The most frustrating, anger-inducing parts it is solving. There's another whole class of things that the AI makes possible that is also unexpected. And let me give you just a very quick example. I guess I have to switch back here. It's not that important, but it's an example. Maybe you would call it the sort of finishing touches, final details, but here's an example. When you click on a neighborhood here, see how it turns red to remind you, this is to remind you that you've got a setting here that you might want to undo. This one you probably wouldn't forget, but here's an effect. Let's say you turn on an effect. And I turn on the grayscale version of the map. Okay. Now see how it turns a slightly different icon. This is a very small thing, but okay. Now, that's a little subtle thing. It's also, if I was just coding this myself, I would not implement that feature. Why wouldn't I? Because the trade-off in the amount of work I'd have to do to figure out how to do that and write the code to change the CSS class when it's active, and I wouldn't write that feature. I wouldn't implement it. It's not enough bang for the buck. It's too much work. It's too much extra stuff for a small benefit. But the reality is that if you can tell the AI to do it, that's something I don't have to worry about. A whole new class of subtleties, a whole new class of fine details become all of a sudden feasible to do. And in a similar sense, there's a whole bunch of things that you might not end up using. So you might say, hey, I wonder if it would be a good idea to present the user with the dialogue that showed this information side by side with this information. Or I wonder if it would be useful to import this data and remap it and do this thing. And if you were having to code that all by hand, you would say, you know what? I'm not going to do it. It's too much work, and there's only a 20% chance I'm actually going to use that thing. But with the AI, it's like having the money to pay the assistant to say, like you're Wolfram, and you say, go spend 2 days coding up this mock-up so I can have a 20% chance of deciding I'm going to use it. So now all of a sudden, you've got the ability to have all these things prototyped and implemented so that you could look at them. It's shocking, the things that you open up because of that. I'm going to answer some of these questions in a minute. I'm almost done here. Another incredibly important thing for me. This is the thing that actually was at the very top of my wish list 2 years ago when the AI coding started getting good, but wasn't quite good enough to handle a whole project of multiple files. I frequently work on big projects that have dozens of files spread out, lots of classes. And if you're not a programmer, you may not realize that when you write code, as the code gets larger and bigger and the project changes in how it works, you get lots of old, kludgy, poorly organized code. It's like evolution. The code evolves, and what used to be a good structure and organization and breakdown of classes, like this does this, this does this, this does this is in this file, all of those things were built for one purpose with one thing in mind, and they've evolved, and over time, everything gets messy. It gets messy and hard to maintain. There's a whole term in programming for fixing the structure of your code and rewriting it without changing what it does, and that's called refactoring. And refactoring, there's a real joy and pain to refactoring. It's wonderful to spend a day reorganizing and rewriting your code so that it's cleaner and more elegant and easier to maintain, but you've not added any new features, and the chances of you breaking something are high, especially if something is spread through multiple files. It can be very painful, so painful that one doesn't do it, but one would love to be able to do it, especially a project where you're changing how you do things. And for me, it's one of the things that brings me the most satisfaction when it's done, but is also some of the least fun things to do, refactoring. It has no benefit in terms of features. Anyway, the AI is good enough now that it can do major refactoring fairly well. And one of the real joys in this project was to be able to say, okay, look, I've changed my mind how I've structured this. Go refactor this code, put this function in this class, make this change the way these classes are organized. So that is a real game changer. The other whole thing I haven't talked about, this is all in the scope of programming, this is all using the AI to do coding, but especially like you can see in a project like this, there's a whole giant role for getting data, working with data in code. So for example, in the directories, you could see that there were icons for each of the categories, right? So there's 100 categories of places. There's banks, insurance companies, restaurants. And each of those places has an icon that represents, there's an icon of a bank and an icon of a restaurant. And so I needed to make a map that the software can use that says, here's the category of the place, which icon should I use? Now, normally you would have to write that by hand. You'd make a list of all the categories, and then you'd write a very simple data structure that says, when it's a bank, use icon from this data set called, bank4.svg. In my case, and you have to go through that by hand. In my case, I've found some free icon sources. I downloaded them into a directory, and then I told the AI, go through this JSON dictionary that I already use that maps the categories to other stuff. And I want you to make a map that has this list of 150 categories, and go find the image based on its name that you think is the best match for that category. In 5 minutes, it's got 150 maps saying, I think the bank is probably best associated with this financial category, and here's a list of the ones I couldn't find, and then I can say, okay, you know what? Do it again, make sure you don't reuse icons, and it's just, that's hours of monotonous, unpleasant work. You still have to do maybe some fine tuning, but saving you from that huge amount of work is just, it's indescribable how much of a game changer it is. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. And whatever imperfections there are in doing something like that are completely obliterated by the fact that you could tell this thing just do it again, do it again, do it again. I changed my mind. I told you to do it this way, do it this way. It never gets tired. It never complains. So whatever imperfection it might have in some task, you just tell it to try it again a little bit differently. The biggest problem I had was forcing myself to ask the AI to do stuff when my instinct is like, just code it. It's harder to explain than to code. Sometimes you just have to tell yourself, okay, let me just write out what it should do and trust that it could do a good job. If it can't do a good job, you step in. It's absolutely shocking. And at the end of this month, I came away thinking we are in as big a revolution as we've had as humans. I don't think everyone fully appreciates where we are now. And it's just going to get better and better and better. Some people, I've talked to people that think it's flattening out. I don't think that's the way these things work. They flatten and then they exponential again. So we may be at a small lull of flattening, but we don't need to get any, it does not need to get any better. If it didn't get any better than it is now, we have got a revolution on our hands. In terms of programming, it is a total shock to me. And it's a total change in the way coding is done. It's going to wipe out most of the jobs of programmers. It's clear to me. I don't know how that works in society when every white collar, every job of anyone who makes art, programs, writes, it's all going to get wiped out. But on the other hand, for someone like me, the fact that I can still do all the enjoyable creative parts of the programming and the AI is doing all the monotonous grunt work is a wonderful feeling. It's a little scary. It's a little scary how now... It's scary too, but it's also a little bit weird, feeling like everyone's a programmer now. Everyone can write code. I mean, I still have to spend a couple hundred hours of my own time programming, but it made the whole project much less frustrating and monotonous than it would normally be. Okay, let me answer a couple questions here. Did you feel you could be more creative as the AI takes the frustrating parts away? Yes. Do you use AI regularly in your job, or was this new for you? Yeah, I am not a big AI user in general. I mean, I have an academic history with it, but I've been avoiding the AI coding for a while. I do enjoy programming, so I was sort of waiting until it got to this stage. I just didn't think it was going to get this good, this fast, and this good at handling. The revelation for me is how good it is at handling full projects now, because I understood that it was good at answering very short little snippets of, here's a function, write me a regex to do something, fix this function or do this, figure out how to make this LaTeX call to this API. But now the fact that you can say, here's this project with dozens and dozens of files and make these calls, figure out, the fact that I can work with a whole project of dozens and dozens of files and it can manage it is a total game changer. Water says, I've completely let go of the code now. These days I write 0 lines of code. In other words, the AI is writing all of the code. Water is just telling it what code to write. I think probably for this project, I wrote a good majority of the code I wrote. Maybe I could have had the AI write for me, but it was just more convenient and more enjoyable for me to write most of the code. So I wrote most of the code, except for big chunks to do stuff that I hate, like the user interface design. I did not design any of the dialogues for the settings screens and stuff. That's the stuff I hate. The AI did all of that. But Water is saying that he's getting to the place where he doesn't even write the raw code. That's certainly where we're going. Good luck with fixing the bug if it goes wrong. That's the part. My experience is that the AI is not just good at writing code, but good at finding and fixing bugs. Occasionally it does something silly. Often it will correct itself in mid-sentence. It'll be like, all right, let me tell you how to do this. First you do this, then you do this, and then in its, without losing its breath, it's saying, no, that's wrong. But if AI replaces programming jobs, how can programmers adapt to that job? I don't know, and that's out of my pay grade. But it's not if. It's not. It's a much. That sentence is a huge understatement. It's not if AI replaces some programming jobs. It's the AI is already replacing huge numbers of programming jobs, and it's going to replace almost all of them. It's very clear to me. I do not, and all the writers and all the translators and it's just all going. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. It's all going. For those of us who don't depend on it for employment, who just want to create stuff, it's pretty magical. I mean, if you're not a programmer, but you have dreams of writing software, we are now there. We are now at the point where if you are not a programmer, but you want to make a program that does something, you have an idea for a piece of software, we are there. We are now at the stage where you could write that. And the AI will help you build it and deploy it and figure out how to run it and fix the bugs. Okay, here's an important question because I'm always looking for ways to mention the Patreon. Are these AI programming tools for free or do you have to pay to use them? Okay, so these are big, heavyweight software tools that use giant data centers. The tool I used, not the only tool, but the tool I used, Claude, has a free version and has a reasonably cheap version and has an expensive version. And has a very expensive version. Because I used it extensively for the last month, I signed up for a $100 a month plan for using Claude. So I paid $100 in January to use Claude as much as I need. There's a whole, YouTube is filled with videos about the AI programming tools, and there's a whole, I am not the expert on it. There's a whole thing of paying cost per token and how to be efficient about that. The bottom line is, though, that I can't afford $100 a month every month for Claude, but for intensive work on a project for a month, it was well worth it. Well worth an order of magnitude more than that for what it did. But what I was saying is that the Patreon supporters of this channel help pay for that. So if you are supporting the channel through Patreon, supporting the New York Noir work, that's one of the things that your support of the channel makes it possible for me to do. All right. I think we're going to start wrapping things up here. Let me just very quickly skim through my remaining slides here. Okay, a little bit of the development roadmap. I do want to finalize the directory data, but there has to be one more pass through the directory. Mostly, I'd love to find someone who can look through all the ethnic names for these couple dozen ethnicities and just look for any oddities. The AI does a little more hallucinating currently than I'd like for that, so I'd like to have a human person go through it. But I also want to place people a little bit better. I have a couple ideas for how to place people a little bit better, and those are the fictional people that would require regeneration. I think the fictional and real businesses are fine. It's the people that I want to do another pass. There was a question you wanted to ask 2 slides ago, maybe for I do have a question about the map and online search tools, about whether I should add a certain feature, but I think I'll save that for when I do the tutorial and people start using that. But here are our goals here. I want to lock down and finalize the directory data, at least by May. Then I can really take the chains off of authors and say, you can write cases and you can feel safe that things aren't going to be changed too much. The art, we're going to try to get finalized, at least the art for all the building art that Logan is doing, and then we'll aim for, at the start of 2027, getting physical production. Now, I know there aren't that many people still here after 2 hours, but let me put out the call for some volunteers who are interested in this project to join us here. And the first class of volunteers we could really use is a couple more artists. So let me just go over the stuff. Logan has been doing amazing work on the building art. That's the black and white real art of real buildings of the time period scattered all over the map. And Logan has a couple more things he's going to do. One is to fill in the harbors and the rivers with some nice ships and stuff. But the other big piece of map art that's needed to give some real color and flavor to the neighborhoods are all of these greenery areas, parks. And there's several hundred of these little park blocks that need illustrations. Some of them are well-known real parks that we'd like to be sort of modeled on what the layout of the park really looks like, and some are fictional. I love this style that Adam Hall did a little mock-up of. And so this is sort of what I want. So there's 2 sort of volunteers needed here for this. Logan says he's willing to do this if it has to be him. I do think it's a different style than the buildings. If we could find someone who could do this kind of style for these greenery areas, and maybe a helper to do research on the real parks. Lauren Felber has done actually a lot of research on that already, but basically a little tandem operation with someone researching the real parks, finding a nice photo of the layout, and then someone doing these little illustrations. We have a whole system for that the art gets done in these overlays and then get brought into the map. But talk to me if that's what you're interested in. We have a couple other pieces of art that have to get puzzles that have to get solved. There are a bunch of auxiliary maps like Central Park. We're currently using an existing old picture of Central Park. It's reasonable. The art that really is not great, that really could use a map maker to take on, are these auxiliary maps. So we've got maps of the outer boroughs, and here's Manhattan where it fits in, and then here's the Bronx and Queens and Brooklyn. These aren't, if we didn't remake these, we could live with these. So basically, Manhattan we've populated fully with places, but every district in Brooklyn has a lead that you can visit. It's not on this page, but this shows you all the different neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has one lead. So these are useful. Then we've got this rough, busy picture of where Manhattan fits in with surrounding islands. So we've got Bedloe's Island where the Statue of Liberty is, and then Governor's Island and Ellis Island where immigrants came, and then here's New Jersey, and then we've got Rikers Island, a prison, and Randall's Island. So we need someone to make a much more clean, non-busy map showing where these neighboring islands are. And then maybe we could have some extra maps. I don't think I have Rikers Island anymore in the map. But anyway, okay, so some auxiliary little map drawing. Another idea that we really want to do is to have business cards for main contacts in the cases. So for my high and low campaign, I've got a list of 12 different, there's like allies, friends, people that you would expect. Sorry about that. So anyway, allies that you visit in every case. And then, so we'd like to have business cards made up for each of those 12 people in my case. And then as a service to the other authors, for authors who want to create their own world of context in multiple cases, to help produce those. So we need someone to sort of produce templates and art that could be customized for each little ally. These are little mock-ups by Eric from BGG, who did amazing ones for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. He did these, but he said, look, I really don't have the time to do the rest. So we look for someone. This is just a sample of the kind of thing they might look like. Love to have more custom yellow page ads created to make the yellow pages a little more fun with some fictional ads. Then here's some other volunteers I would love to have, just proofreading the directories and maps, looking at them from a game perspective. Are there categories that we haven't thought of? Are there more fictional places and people that we should anticipate putting in? There's a whole bunch. There's tons of little Easter eggs in the directories. Lots of sort of supernatural, H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhu, hinted names of places like Temple of the Serpent and stuff that I've scattered around for people to make some supernatural cases. But you could imagine that we might be able to add in more stuff or whole categories, or maybe even real places. Like we just had someone come in and say, I'm making a case that's centered around magicians, which is my background. And I've got like 6 famous magicians that were in New York City, like Houdini and his friends. Here's where they lived. And here's some famous magic shops in the city that you don't have. And so those all got added to the directory. But I can't help but think that there are probably lots of other similar things that similar experts might want put in. Like I recently found some brochures of like museum tours of New York City. So I made sure that all those museums were in the city, like things like that. Always looking for more authors of cases. But I had a thought the other day that, you know, what would be really nice, sort of like a community manager for authors who felt good about like wrangling the authors, like making sure that all the authors finished playtesting their cases, make sure that they've collected their difficulty levels. So someone to sort of make sure that help the authors, be like a liaison with authors to make sure that the cases are presented in the best light, that they're polished. It's like a little bit like playtesting, but at a higher level. Making sure that there's some consistency between all the different cases, making sure that all the cases and authors look good, and maybe helping the authors with some things they might be a little bit uncomfortable with, maybe updating the wiki, maybe helping tune up their cases, etc. All right, wrapping up where to participate or learn more. The main place that we chat live is the Discord, the Co-op for Two Discord. There's a whole bunch of channels for New York Noir. There's the Board Game Geek page for New York Noir. That's the place where, that's the persistent store of information. Forum posts, videos are all linked there. You've got my email. You can email me. You can download and play a whole bunch of cases right now. I suggest you start with the demo case. That'll give you some feel for how the game works, which I haven't talked about today. Obviously, it's all discussed in the previous videos and discussions. I've been recently discussing with Lux in the channel about some old theories of storytelling. I've had videos where I've talked about my favorite 3 books. If you're interested in writing cases, books on writing mystery stories and stuff like that. If you visit the Board Game Geek page, you can subscribe and favorite the game, which would be good because then I can keep track of the people that are fans of the game. Then you'll get notified when a new post goes up or when the game is actually released. The New York Noir website also has a mailing list you could subscribe to. The only thing I've been sending out there is once every 3 or 4 months, I send out a reminder that I'm doing another design diary. I think that's it. Okay, so we went long today, but let's chat for a bit if there are any other questions. Do you need the best version? It's not really a best version. It's just how much you can use it. And $20 a month, I was hitting my limit constantly. At $100 a month, I never hit my limit. I used it a lot, and I never hit a limit. When is the next meeting? I'm not sure what that means. The next design diary will be in a couple months. I will be at Gen Con this year in August. I'll probably set up some playthroughs of New York Noir there if you're interested in talking in person. Luxum says, on the directory changes, it would be useful in the debug report if we could get a list of last names that went from single to multiple entries. Yes, that's a very good question. There are actually some features in the casebook language that are made for that. Not for that one, but there is something like this. Let me tell you what there are some advanced features in casebook. Let's say you have a case that involves someone going to a bank, but the player is not going to be sure what bank they went to. And so you want to make sure that you've got an entry for every bank so that if they go to that, you're like, oh, I talked to the guy, he said nothing. So you can write a little function, a little line of code. You add a line to your casebook that says, there should be an entry for every bank in Times Square. And when the debug report runs, it'll tell you if you're missing entries for some banks. And you're suggesting something very similar to that says, I think actually there is a function for last name. I think you can tell it, there should be an entry for every person with this last name. And it'll give you in your report if you don't have entries for certain last name, there are certain people with that last name that you don't have entries for. I think actually I might already have that in there. Anna says, I made my business cards with AI. It's easy. One of the directories is going to be ready for printing. The answer is before the end of the year. That's the hard answer. Absolute hard deadline is before the end of this year. The directors are going to get locked in, ready for printing. I think quite a bit before that, the data won't change, but it's still going to be a little while longer to get the layout perfect, get all the art we want perfect, get the art touched up a little bit. What else? We are down to 21 viewers. So I've already gone past the 90-minute mark. Are you going to have it ready by Gen Con? It's a good question. I would like to. I mean, I definitely will have printed versions of the directory to play at Gen Con. I always do. And I'll probably print out a new set for Gen Con. But whether that's the final set or not, I don't know. I mean, it is a pain to print out and bind these big, giant directories. It's a lot of toners, so I try to do it as infrequently as possible. George Ryan Sharm says, great work, Jesse. The time and effort you've put in really shows. Yeah, I mean, I go through periods where I'm like, this is a ridiculous waste of time. I can't believe that I'm still working on this. And then other times when I feel like, well, it's too late to turn back. Do you think we're going to have a meeting before Gen Con? You mean when you say meeting, you mean another design diary video? March, April, May, June, July. We will absolutely have another design diary before Gen Con. Yes, I try to do one every few months, so probably in another 3 or 4 months. I am looking forward this year to playing more of these cases that you guys have been writing, Anna and Jonathan. So I do want to get the directories finalized and printed for that. Do let me know how those online map search tools work for you and any feature requests. All right. I think we can wrap up, but I'll stand here for a couple more questions. A whole world created to develop stories on it. Yes. How are you going to have the author manager contact all the authors? By email or the Discord. Any other questions? It would be nice in the map atlas if block numbers for adjacent neighborhoods show. Do you think that's really important? I mean, I certainly could. I certainly could do it. The neighborhood atlas pages are all generated by an open source tool called QGIS, and I had to work pretty hard to get it to dim out stuff outside the neighborhood, but it would certainly be easy for me to pop back in block numbers. I don't know if that's a good idea, though. It is going to be fascinating to think about the online tools versus the physical tools. Like, we're going to do this is going to be a very good juxtaposition between people who want the analog stuff and the digital stuff. And I do wonder if it's going to cause some issues in terms of playtesting. Like, there's certain things that are just a lot easier with the online tools. And for example, I mean, here, if you're trailing someone who goes up to Greenwich Village, okay, so you got to go to Greenwich Village. Okay, you go to Greenwich Village and you say, okay, he came up on 6th Avenue, came from down here on 6th Avenue. Here it is. So this is where he came. On the online map, you just zoom in and it's all one big map, stuff like that. Here, if you want to say who lives in 36, well, okay, you get out your book here, you go Greenwich Village, 36 block. Here are all the people that live on Greenwich Village 36. You're juggling 3 directories. It's all works pretty smoothly, I think. It's all really designed for printed stuff, but it is shocking how much easier some stuff is to do with the online tools. And I do worry a little bit, like, you might make a case that's like medium difficulty for the online tools and hard for printed tools, just because some stuff is more elaborate work for the physical tools. But I think it'll be fine. I think the people who want the physical tools want the old analog experience and are willing for it to be a little harder. what are you thinking about play by mail? How would that work? Well, I have lots of thoughts on the play by mail stuff. The AI stuff has got me even more excited about the fact that it's become a more practical thing to write some substantial code to do play by mail versions of cases. But I'm going to save that for a sec, another design diary, because it's too much to go involved. But suffice it to say, the goal is to have the same tools for writing cases, which uses this custom little language called Casebook that I've written to write cases, to make it possible for someone to write a case that's not meant to be played in a book like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, but is made to be played where you submit moves, you get a letter in the mail or by email a few days later, which tells you the results of where you went to, who you went to talk to. So you get a 2-page little letter, and then you decide where to go to next. And there's lots of subtleties to that. And different ways that it could be done. And we'll have to save that for another discussion. Day by day. Well, it's a little tricky. There are subtleties to it. We've played a bunch of games that are no longer in existence by a company called Murders by Mail, and they had a very clever idea where each week or each day you send 3 different detectives with different skills to different places, and you get different replies depending on who you send. So I think I'd want to have support for that kind of case. But if you're just going to be controlling one detective, then my idea is you kind of have a queue of places that you're interested in, and that the replies are like, okay, I went here, I went here, I went here. It will do as many of the places as it could until it finished 2 pages worth of replies, and then it would send you the reply, and then you'd go and tweak your queue of which places you view and of what importance. But there are other ideas, lots of other ideas to consider of some very exciting, cool stuff we could do. And I think the AI stuff makes that even adds another layer of things you could do. How are you going to get it sent? I think we'd first concentrate on doing it all by email, and then we'd look for whether it was worth it, whether people wanted to pay to have letters sent to them and use some service. All right, let me wrap it up here after 2.5 hours. Thank you for joining me. Do consider joining the Discord, hopping on Board Game Geek, and being part of the project if you're interested in it, writing a case, playing a case, volunteering to help out. We'd love to have some more help. I'd love to have some more help. Thank you for listening and your feedback and ideas and your encouragement and support. I'll see some of you tomorrow for our Sunday session. The rest of you, I'll see you on Board Game Geek or the Discord or on the next video.